So, let me get this straight. You want to drop out of playoffs.
Look, I've done this for over half a decade. I'm tired. I can't keep up with these kids anymore.
Well, if you quit playing, well, what then? We've got a match coming up soon.
Listen, I have the answer right here. A way to start a brand new life.
I'm gonna hit the John, and I'm hoping you come to your senses by the time I'm back.
I won't.
Are you sure about this?
I sweeped out the area. There's no odds whatsoever. They won't even see us coming. It's gonna be completely free. This is a gang!
Everybody get on the floor! Now!
Did you not hear me, old man? You're on a trip to the fountain. Well, well, well. If it isn't G2. Don't you know the bottom of the standings is further down the road?
SK, XL, what are you doing here?
There's a change coming. This is new blood territory. What's in the suitcase?
EU's chances of winning Worlds.
Don't bullshit me. Show me.
What is it?
It's beautiful.
Let him go! Let him go! Let him go, or I'm gonna release God Gilish's might upon you.
Tell her to be cool. Say SK, be cool.
SK, be cool.
Don't hurt him.
Nobody's gonna get hurt. We're gonna be just like the Freljord. SK, what's that like? I said, what's that like, SK? Cool? Correctissimo. You're gonna drop the gun and put your hands on the table on the count of 3. You with me? 1, 2, 3.
Ooh, smooth and 4 picks of twisted fades.
You think they're going to one Korean bootcamp and figuring out a single patch makes you the same level as me? They call me the Korean Killers.
Last time I checked, Gramps, this was in 2019. Korean Killers don't go 0-3 versus T1.
You've lost sight of yourself, old man. You have no idea what being a pro is all about.
You think that I don't know what it means to be a pro? I've got this passage memorized from the chat logs of FLICKR at 1337. The path of the pro is beset on all sides by the inequities of the patches and the tyranny of the meta. But blessed is he who, in the name of mechanics and good macro, shepherds their teammates through the fog of war. For he is truly his jungler's leash and the stealer of lost objectives. And I will cast down upon thee with great memes and furious banter those who attempt to int and feed in my solo queue games, and you will know I am the GOAT when I lay my vengeance upon you. You know, for the longest time, I thought I was the pro, beset by the inequities and tyranny of this world. Then later in life, I really wanted to become the shepherd, and I tried. But just now, I've had the realization that I am no pro and no shepherd, for 20mm water cannon here is and will always be the GOAT. I am simply its vengeance, but I am trying real hard to be the shepherd.
He's crazy. It's not worth it. Let's get out of here. We're scaling.
So, if you're really going to retire, nothing I can do about it. I'll help you whenever I can.
I have completely changed my mind.
Are you serious? Changing my fast and BDS at Baron.
Yeah, while you were in the John, I was reminded about why I started doing this in the first place. And it's to stop these perma-inting teams on my fiddle-sticksing stage. We have a game to play. Come on, let's go.
Welcome to week 7 of the LEC summer season. The heat is on this weekend as we're approaching the end of the regular split and all playoff spots are still up for grabs. My name is Frankie Ward. I'm going to be your host this weekend, joined by the wonderful Vedius and our new thespian Goldberg. Who knew you had it in you?
Well, I didn't even know the word you just said, so I don't know either.
It means you like acting.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm not sure what's acting in.
You look terrified by the fact that I've just
That
grew
was a
up
great
there.
opportunity. You could have read from your book a quote from Shakespeare, and you could have gone for the whole thespian vibe. It was all there for you, Goldberg. It was written in stone.
I didn't write anything about this.
I mean, there are really no words to describe what we just witnessed in that cold open. I didn't know what was going to be, I guess, unfurled before our eyes. I'm still trying to process it right now. So instead of doing that right now, shall we talk about last week? Shall we recap?
Let's do it.
In what we're calling the good, the mad, and the ugly. It's really the only way to recap last week's action, as Mad Lions solidified themselves at the top of the standings and as the current best team in Europe.
I feel like just with Mad Lions in general, they are just one of the best teams. Well, I'd actually go, they are just the best team we have right now. I think they are the best at playing this LPL aggressive early game style. I think they're really solid at setting out their plans. They're one of the only teams you'll have who will go in aggressive, level 1, drop a ward on camps, and then play around that telegraph that they know they're going to be tracking the enemy jungler about, and then designing a game plan for that. They're just so good at snowballing their leads from the early game.
I think that Mad are just a cut above the rest right now. On top of the fact that we've seen dominance from them in terms of their early game, let's not forget that there was a period in time where this team was one of the best team fighting teams in Europe, and I think that they're very close to reclaiming that title once more. Kaiser seems to be on form with his engages. Armut seems to be having the split of his career. I feel like everything is coming together for the Mad Lions.
What about the good, Goldberg?
Well, I feel like we still saw some good in some of the teams that we didn't expect, actually. And I start out with the Misfits, you know, coming in with a swap, Slotson going back to the L roster with the Misfits Academy, coming in then with the main teams, and Sarah being raised up. And this was a perfect meta for him. We saw the Poppy coming through. We saw how much he was actually able to get done for the team, but I don't think so much of that was on the Rift. It just seemed like Misfits were an entire different team. They kind of just got everything going from them from the at least mid to late game earlier in their team fights. I feel like they've really just solidified themselves as one of the teams you have to worry about moving into the playoff race.
Yeah, and I think that while Misfits were able to separate themselves further from the rest of the pack in what is a mess of the standings right now, Vitality have cemented themselves in second place after a very dominant 2-0 week, finding themselves on a 3-game winning streak, which to many of us is not something that we expected, which may come as a surprise because at the beginning of the year, this was the super team, the team that was supposed to be rivaling the top of the standings, and after their failure last split, I feel like everyone's expectations dramatically fell. But this week, we finally got to see what this team is truly capable of, and hopefully they can maintain this level of performance into this week to keep that momentum going.
Which teams do we need to see more of this week? Who are the ugly?
I feel like there's, you know, there's 3 we've had in mind, right? There's the Rogue, there's the G2, and there's the Fnatic, who's currently struggling right now. And when I think they have different reasons as to why all of them are struggling right now, I feel like one thing they all share is just that they're discohesive. There's not anything really going on well for them on the map. And I feel like when it comes to playing as a team, you know, like usually with good teams, we'll talk about the jungle, the support, and mid synergy. I feel like we haven't really seen that from all of these teams here.
I think that when you look at these names, these are the ones that you expect to be at the top of the standings. G2 coming off the back of an MSI. Rogue, the regular season kings. Fnatic, the other fabled super team. These are the three organizations that coming into summer should be prime candidates to be representing Europe at Worlds. And right now, it seems that all of them are struggling. And as Goldberg said, the reasons seem to be quite different. G2 with their early game issues, Fnatic with their mid to late game issues, Rogue with what seem to be a plethora of issues. All three of them right now need to level up as the race to playoffs only gets hotter and hotter.
Who do you think has the best chance of leveling up this week, Goldberg?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually think that with the patch coming through, and we'll discuss that later, I think Rogue, I'm putting my chips on them in terms of reading the patch, in terms of what they used to be so good at in the past. And then maybe I have my eye out for Comp as well, now that this might be a little more bot lane heavy.
Well, there was so much action last week that obviously we've had some changes in the standings. Take a look at the middle of that table, Freddy. There's quite a lot to play for here.
Yeah, there certainly is. Every single game does in fact count. It is a bit of a trope here in the LEC where as we get close to the playoffs, you know, every game counts becomes the hashtag, but it couldn't really be more true right now when Fnatic, who find themselves tied for 7th with a 2-0 week, could bump themselves into 2nd place. So everything is still on the line. Only 5 games left to go. Every single win really will matter in determining your position in playoffs.
And yet, with so much to play for, they've only gone and released a new patch, Vedius, because for the final 2 weeks of the regular season, we're going to be playing on patch 12.14, which is looking to shake up the meta once more. I'd only just blooming learnt it. Now I've got to learn it all over again. Vedi, can you please sort us out?
I would be happy to, Frankie. And, you know, I've made it simple. I've prepared 3 slides that can summarize the most important things that we need to keep our eyes on as we come onto the new patch here in professional play. And let's start with the Dragons. Fun fact. They've changed. They've been buffed. Their early game attack damage has been reduced. Overall, their HP has been increased. They are a little bit tankier, but overall, they are easier to kill. And you can see this plethora of buffs that have come through for acquiring all of these dragons in the early game, basically making them much more valuable even as single drakes. Now, moving on from this, a few champions that were very prevalent in the meta have also been hit. In particular, Wukong, Gnar, and Gangplank. You're all very familiar with them. First picks, first bans, insta-locks whenever there's an opportunity. These champions have been very prevalent in the meta, but they got nerfed. On top of that, some sustain has been hurt as well. Things like potions, things like the resolve tree, on top of the fact that Scorch and Sudden Impact have been buffed, have made these champions that are traditionally safe and strong in lane affected in a very negative way. But now we see some of this early game shenanigans coming through. What champions can further supplement this? Well, there are a few. LeBlanc, Pantheon, Jarvan. These are 3 of just a few champions that have been buffed in terms of their early game impact. And with dragons becoming more prevalent, with safer champions being nerfed and hurt in the early game, champions like LeBlanc that have crazy early game laning dominance, Pantheon, who's a point and click CC early game monster, and Jarvan, who can help facilitate these engages and teamfights, all look to be prime pickings as we evolve into what I expect to be a very early game dominant meta.
Ooh. Early games. I feel like there's a team or two who are particularly going to benefit from this, Goldberg.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like there's multiple teams that might benefit from, what was that, early games again?
Early
Something
games,
about
yep.
early games, yeah. Well, we already have established that we have 2 excellent teams that are playing for the early games. Mad Lions and XL, to me, are some of the best going for this early game aggression that we so often see from a mid-jungle duo, Makun and, of course, Nuke Dog, but also with Niski and Elyoya. And you can see their stats here as well, right? They are just topping the charts here in our league. So now when the game is so much more about getting these early drakes, getting so much going for you with the defensive runes now all of a sudden being nerfed and aggressive rune being buffed, well, that should automatically benefit the teams that already went for style where it was so early game focused.
And while we look at the positives of the patch, there are some teams that are naturally going to struggle with the patch like this. And in particular, I think that G2 is a team that's really going to suffer, given that their early games have already proven to be disastrous. And Vitality, I think, is another team that, given recently they've showcased a top-side focus play, a lot more facilitated in the early game, I expect that shift to be more towards the bot side of the map. Kazi and Brav are going to have to be the focus of this new meta, and if Vitality aren't able to shift in a short time frame, I think they're going to struggle on what should be a very early game dominant patch.
And that's going to be the big thing going into a new patch, right? We so often highlight teams that all of a sudden get the patch before everyone else. They pick up a few wins. I mean, SK was very reminiscent of then when they found out the thing about Poppy. This is the chance for these teams to suddenly, you know, here's the read on the patch, here's what we need to do. We know it's going to be early game dominant. We need to figure out something soon, else we're just going to fall even further behind than they already were.
Is this patch going to be kicking Fnatic while they're already down?
Well, that's the one that I think we're both a little unsure of, right? Because Fnatic, I think, for the most part, have shown some solid gameplay overall. And even earlier on in the split, when they were winning, they had a lot of aggression towards the top side of the map. They typically played through Wonder. They found a lot of early game successes. Their laners are very reliable. But now they need to shift that approach to the bot side of the map. And historically, Fnatic has always been very good at this. But in recent history, they haven't been able to do just that.
And I think even from the side of Rogue as well, lately, these are two teams that just kind of struggled in finding one identity they wanted to be. With early game changes coming through, of course, yes, there's the dynamic, they need to be more aggressive, but there's also the Drake changes, and they're going to be so pivotal in terms of securing the first few Drakes. And when you want to secure Drakes, well, you need bot lane priority. Both of these teams have incredibly solid bot laners to play for, and I feel like that makes it a little easier for you in terms of, well, what do we really want to play for? Well, now Drakes are suddenly buffed. Let's just throw everything down towards that bottom lane and see if we can just outplay them down there instead.
We talk about Rogue having a formulaic approach to the way they rotate about the map and take those Drakes, so surely we are going to see a better week from them.
Well, ideally, that would be what you would expect, but in sudden patch changes, sometimes this is where Rogue can falter, because historically, this team during the regular season has been very good at finding a methodology to approach the draft and approach the game. But when there is a dramatic patch shift and then the meta suddenly shifts, this team can be a little slow to adapt. Or when they're already on a downturn, finding themselves on a 3-game loss streak, there's a world where that loss streak just continues to mount, which is why I'm very unsure as to what we'll see from Rogue this week.
Well, let's bring up today's schedule, because we've got a couple of games with massive implications in our race for playoffs. I mean, obviously, our opening game between Misfits and Astralis. But Goldborg, anything you're excited about?
Well, obviously, the first game, as you just mentioned, massive playoff implications that you were talking about. And going down that road of the massive playoff implication, SK versus Fnatic is also one to look forward to for sure in terms of who's really going to lock in that playoff spot since they're so close and SK desperate of wins.
For anyone that had the opportunity to listen to the Euphoria podcast, you will have heard Alfari talking about that his upcoming matches are BDS and Astralis. And he was trying his very best to say that they need to not underestimate their opponents and they're going to treat them with respect. But it wouldn't surprise me if Vitality, being the team that they are, did in fact underestimate their opponents. And there was in fact a bit of a surprise victory here today.
Can I just say, he didn't try that hard.
Yeah.
Did you listen to that podcast? Yeah. The way that he spoke about BDS, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something along the lines of, we might just throw the first 10 minutes of the game and int, and then just come back and win it because that's how confident we are that we're going to beat BDS.
That is Alfari showing respect.
Yeah.
I'm quite glad I didn't interview him last weekend then. In our marquee match of the day, we're going to see an epic top-of-the-table clash between first-place Mad Lions and second-place Rogue later on. That's going to be game number 4, and I can't wait.
We are like now top team of the LEC, so we have to show to everyone how is the best team of Europe.
We kind of have the tools to win. Everyone individually kind of mature in terms of, you know, their role in communication. I feel like then everyone's a bit more optimistic and has a bit more trust in our picks and each other.
Boy still standing, Larson stunned. He knocks him back. We wanted to know how they would get into range, and Larson delivers them. Comp with a massive triple.
I think right now we are maybe in the best shape, but we have so many mistakes and we still have so much to improve on that. Yeah, it feels still frustrating to be the best, but not at the highest level, you know?
Unforgiven is about to get knocked up. He does indeed. Moonlight Vigil comes forward, and there's the flash. Unforgiven turning so much damage. He gets the kill inside the pit. Channel on Hex. Can he steal it? He does. Rogue do it. Malrang gets the Baron.
Continues. Jezu being chunked out by Elioya, who flash jumped. You don't beat the Troll King. Mad Lions mid jungle comes to play.
It really is going to be such an exciting match. It's a new LEC rivalry. It's not G2 versus Fnatic, Vedius. Finally.
Yeah, I mean, these two teams have been battling off now, even in finals. We got to see it in the match history just before the show went live, where it was an epic final between the two teams. They've consistently matched when it comes to playoffs. But funnily enough, when we look at the regular season, it is very Rogue dominated, but then in playoffs, when the games really matter, that is when Rogue has often come up clutch.
And that has always been the conversation, right? The fact that Rogue has always been that consistent teams that would always show up in the regular season, they'd be number one. And Mad Lions actually historically had a kind of trope about them that, you know, they were never really good in regular season. They were always a team that were going to show up in the best of fives. And I feel like you can see that as well when you take a look at the playoff stats and the regular season stats they've had to against each other with the head-to-head.
Are we expecting a switcheroo then, come playoffs? Just assuming somehow that the two teams that are at the top of the standings are going to make playoffs. I know everything can change in the next 5 games, but still. Do we think that actually Mad, maybe they've shown everything they have?
I think Mad is just the team that's going to dominate Europe, both in regular season, also in playoffs in general. I think Rogue is going to have a very hard time catching up. They've shown in the past that they're good and they're flexible at understanding what they need to do when they have a task ahead of them. But something about this time in my gut just feels like it's Mad all the way.
And also, when it comes to Rogue, we are surprised at the moment that they're on a 0-3 loss streak. And yet, actually, at the start of the split, they weren't really looking too hot. They were stealing their wins.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like the Rogue have been a little inconsistent this split. A lot of the wins I think that they got, they really shouldn't have. And credit to them, of course, being able to make those plays is just part of League of Legends, and I'm not saying they don't deserve the wins. It's just that when you look at the level of performance that they have brought this split compared to last, it's difficult to have the same level of faith in this Rogue that we've had in previous seasons.
To quote Odo Omni, they're a bunch of troopers. Now, coming up, we've got Misfits Gaming versus Astralis. They are two teams who are currently neck and neck in the standings. Let's remind ourselves of those right now. There is so much to play for. I believe that Misfits, they're tied 3 ways for 4th at the moment, and Astralis right behind them in 7th. It's a little bit confusing. I had to get my mind around it at first, but eventually I did because handily, you can see, win-loss streaks.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is typically we would be saying that these two teams are now fighting for that last playoff spot, but arguably, they're still fighting for a position at 2nd place, right? Like, the standings are so close. The fact that Misfits is only 1 game behind 2nd place not only shows the importance of the head-to-head, but also for the rest of the seeding as well. And losing here can really affect your chances, especially when everyone is so close, and we get closer and closer to locking in those.
And just to hammer home how important this win is for Misfits, Astralis already won the 1st game against them earlier in this season, which means that if Astralis take it today, they have the 2-0 head-to-head, and if they continue to be this close, or it's just, you know, Astralis and Misfits sharing the place at the end of our season, well, Misfits are just going to be knocked out.
Last week, I got the pleasure of being on the floor, borrowing the microphone from this lady right here. It's time to say bonjour to Laure, because she is joined by Astralis' Thursday. Take it away, Laure.
Thank you so much, Frankie and Xasi. Thank you also for joining me for this interview. I'm actually sad that you can't be in the studio, but I heard that COVID has been hitting you guys a bit hard. How is it going? How are you managing through this situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough a week and a half now because we haven't been, let's just say we haven't been in sync with the COVID. And yeah, I'm really disappointed that we can be on the stage in front of the crowds. But I'm hoping that at least for the next week we can be back.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Super week, you're back, and wishing you all the swift recovery. But also, I want to point out that even though you guys have been sick, you've been performing so good, and especially when I think about last week, the early game from Astralis initiated what you've been doing in game has been phenomenal. I want you to talk me through your early game impact and your growth as a player in helping the lanes get ahead.
So I would say most of the time jungle diff is just support diff, honestly. And yeah, I think my support Junghoon has been an absolute beast this split, and it's been very easy to play for this team and with him. And I think overall, like, I have a really good synergy with my laner, so yeah, makes my life pretty easy.
He has been praised a lot, as you said, and rightfully so, honestly, given that it's his first split in Europe. What sets him apart from the other supports, you would say?
I think he's just crazy, and I think he's just really crazy. Like, I don't know what else to say. The angles and the opportunities this man sees are just... I think some people have said that, you know, he's like a bit like Hylissang.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think from his gameplay, we can all agree he's really crazy. So that definitely brings that surprise factor, I guess.
Another mad scientist in the LEC. Staying on the topic of mad scientists, actually, but on the jungle, or rather, you've been facing off against Misfits today. The Taxman is back. Another crazy player in the likes of Zanzara, if I may say. You played Zlatan in the first round, Robit, but this time it's a new jungler. And we were talking about the early game for Astralis. I think the early game for Misfits is also an improvement from last week. How do you plan on tackling the early game, and what do you think of bringing in Zanzara for the team?
Thing is, I don't think I've ever played against Zanzara, so I'm not sure. I've only heard the tales of him, right? So yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. I'm pretty sure he wants to win against his whole team. Yeah, just let's hope I'm hoping for a good game.
Giving him extra fuel, no doubt. And yeah, be careful about the trundle. We know that. Xerxes, thank you so much for the interview. I wish you the best of luck on the Rift. And Frankie, back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laure. Interesting to hear from Xerxes then. He's heard tales of Zanzara, but I want to know the tale. Yeah, many have. I heard a few stories, and I heard even more last weekend. But what about the tale of Xerxes? So he had a disappointing time on Immortals in NA, but now he's back in the LEC with a point to prove.
Yeah, and I think that he's proving it, in my opinion, because you're right in that in North America, he was heavily criticized by the fans. He didn't have the strongest showing. But domestically, he's always been a very creative and strong jungler, regardless of what team he's been on. He was famous for his Zac, his Rumble jungle. Like, he would come up with all sorts of crazy picks. And I think that already on Astralis, he is a key part of their early game. And you can look at how involved he is with the team. Like, first for kill participation as part of his team, one of the highest damage percentages. Like, he's very active in the early game, and he is a core part of what makes Astralis good in the early game.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's kind of just what's bridging them in there, because if you take a look at the, holistically, Astralis in the early game, they're not that good, but in some of their recent victories they had, and with the gold lead they often gain from themselves, all of that gold is located at Xerxes. He's the one who's bridging that early game into the mid to late game, and then they find these late game team fights that we know Astralis is so capable, how they've got so many of their victories, but Xerxes, he's the one getting them there.
Is there anything the rest of his teammates could be doing to actually help make the most of that gold lead and help him in the early game?
Well, I think that Jonghoon is his partner in crime, right? He's the guy that works alongside him, and we saw him in a bunch of these clips. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Zanzara matches up against that, because this level of pressure is something that I expect to be rampant once again from Astralis. That jungle support synergy has been what made Astralis successful so far in the early game, and Zanzara is still finding that formula with his team, right? He's not the same level of early game impact that we have seen from other junglers, and I don't expect him to try and match Xerxes in the early game, but we'll see how he handles that level of pressure that Xerxes and Jonghoon are going to try and throw down towards him.
Well, last week, Zanzara was called up for the Misfits, and he immediately brought in quite a spectacularly positive vibe into the team. Let's have a listen in to some of their comms.
I want to see a 255 clear leashless.
It's not possible. So how many camps? How many camps? How many camps?
Every camp, 250.
Very good. I don't think I'm not too there. So I can't. Look, he can't even look at me because he knows Skarner is coming. Oh! I was timing Summoners, my bad.
That's fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, go back.
Okay, it's good. Catch right.
My bad.
It's fine, Summoners, guys?
Got record.
It's not flash, right? Yeah. One Skarner Trundle and not first pick pot, guys. Nice draft. I don't know. I'm used to taking wins from Rock, so it was like nothing. Was nothing special, nothing special, just another day on the jobs for me, so guys.